The one we were doing yesterday, right?
Yeah.
I didn't work on it after that. I will
Okay.
show to you. It's not proper
Okay.
to modify few things. So
Okay. So we can actually make it more simplified way. In your you're trying this with recursive or without recursive?
with recursive only.
With
So
recursive,
this
right? So then you can actually reduce it. So there are two ways to do this. So which approach did you like? What was the basic idea behind for you to start with this approach? Like, do you have any pattern to follow for your logic?
so one moment. I think I have some issue with the network connection. I will switch
Okay.
and join back.
Okay, sure.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Nigam. So what was your question?
So did you follow any pattern? Like, what was your ideology to go with that recursive? Like,
So I thought I will try with brute force approach first. So when it's working, then I will thought I will switch to dynamic program, but it wasn't
no,
working
no,
as expected.
that I understood. Like what was the base pseudocode you followed to achieve this problem?
Nothing as such, just trial and error.
Okay, fine. Okay, so we can solve this in two ways. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
So for us, the inputs which we have taken were 1, 2, 3, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So these were our inputs. So there are two approaches. One is like you can either pick this coin and then go with or you can discard the coin and then go with it. So it is going to be a recursive function, but we are going to do it in two ways, either to pick the coin or not to pick the coin. So how are we going to do that? So the value of n which we are going to receive from here is 4. So we need to see like how many possibilities of 4 can be achieved from this 1, 2, 3. 4 ones or 2 twos or 3 ones and 2 ones and 2 2 or 1 1 and 1 3. So what are the combinations are there for us to achieve the final result of 4? So if you go with the approach of pick the coin, right? So let's say if I'm picking the coin, so what I have to do is every time I'm picking a coin, I'm gonna detect it from the total value. So right now my value of the coin is 4. So I'll just note it here, is 4. So when I'm going to the left side, which approach I'm following is I'm going to pick this coin. So what I'm going to do is my n value minus the first coin value. This is the approach I'm going to take. So what happens is, since my n value is 4, 4 minus 1 is 3. So here I'll get 3. Since I'm picking the coin, the rest all will remain same here. So it will be like 1, 2, and 3. Now, if I'm dropping the coin, I don't want to consider the 1 itself. If I'm going to discard this coin, my approach would be with the same 4, but right now I have only 2 values, 2 and 3. So either from your denominations, you can reject 1 and then go with 1 approach, or with the final approach where you're considering that 1 and then going with approach. So this tree continues in the recursive order, and finally you will get to a place where either your n falls into less than 0 or greater than 0 condition. So based on that, so how you use Fibonacci, like if you have the predefined values for n equal to 0 and n equal to 1, and we use the same 0 and 1 often after doing a recursive callback. So if you go again for this 3, 1, 2, 3, there are again 2 approaches. You can either pick the coin or you can either drop the coin. Same way for this one, when you go, you'll have again 2 options. You can either pick the coin or drop the coin. So now if I pick the coin, what happens? 3 minus 1 is 2. So you'll have 2.
Is it like we need to pick the same coin again and again, or you can go with different coin as well?
You can go with different coins. And since we are using the same use case, we're going with this. Did I answer or did I miss it? I didn't get the question.
So you're reducing 1, right? From 3, you're reducing 1. What if we reduce 2?
No, anyway, that happens again here, right? This tree, this is pick up, this is your dropping. And again, the left will become your pick and right will become drop. So every time, all the coins will have that opportunity to pick and drop. So the tree of 1 is, since its value is 4, till you achieve the value n equal to 0, we'll be continuing this the length of tree. So I'm just going with the 1 tree. So if you go with this, so again, if I'm going with pick option here, so 2 minus 1. So here I'll get again 1 with the coins 1, 2, and 3. So now if I need to go further and do one more pick of this, I have one more possibility, which is 1 minus 1, 0. So it is like 0 with the rest of coins. So I can't go ahead further this, because if I need to go 0 minus 1, which is negative side, so I can't go and mark my bases again after this as the root. So the total last node I can go is only 0. So the approaches which I go for this particular tree on the 3 level is 0. So what I'm going to do is, if my n value is 0, I'm going to return it with 1. Then I'll again go with this particular right side, drop. So what happens here is, since I'm dropping it off, I don't want the first coin. So I'll be having 3 with 2, 3. And again, this again follows with pick and drop. did you get it? Like what I'm doing, like pick and drop? Maybe if you see the code, you'll get an understanding. So I'm going till I'm doing as a narrow down search. So where I can get the value as either n0 or less than 1 or greater than 1. These are the possibilities I'm planning to take it. So only way I can end my recursive call. Otherwise, it will be like an infinite loop again and again. So now other question is, when should I end my loop? So since right now I have in the n as 4, right now my height of the tree is like 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the height of the tree right now. So every time for every node, I'm having left and right branch. So the complexity would be really high, which is 2 power n. So how can I achieve this in a programming way is this one. So what I have taken is I have predefined some values. If my value is 0, then I'll say it's like it's a successful way. It's a possibility I can consider. So I'm taking it as 1. If my value is less than 0, I can't go ahead and do this further approach where I can't go and give 0, -1 and -1. I can't go with a negative because as per the ticket, we're going to only with the positive values. So we are returning it with 0. Now what I'm doing is, since we are going with 2 approach, pick the coin and drop the coin. So what I'm doing in the pick the coin is, every time I get the value n minus the coin value. And then every time I'm iterating it same, I'm not incrementing my index positions, or I'm not going with next. Till my value achieves 0 or 1 or negative value, I'm going to continue this loop. So first I'm taking like in the same count method, I'm calling the same input. And in the index, I'm predefining it with 0 because this is the initial level. So I'm just defining with 0. And now here, what I'm going to do is I'm minusing the input minus the coins denomination of each value. So here, whatever you get 1, 2, 3, I'm going to subtract it from each time. I'm going to achieve the result set of either 0 or 1 or less than 0. Next, what is the other approach we have followed is discarding it. So in discarding, we're not considering the first element itself. So here we are worried about the iteration and not about the coin values. So what we have done is, in the same method, instead of doing a subtraction to your values, we are going to increment the index. But if you go like this, there will be an array index out of bound exception, because we never knew how many times we're going to continue. Say here, if I'm going here with 4, 2, 3, it's again pick. This is a pick approach, pick the coin. Let's go with the drop the coin. So if I'm going with the drop the coin, here I'll be like 4, I'm going to drop the coin and I'll be with 3. Now, again, if I go with this one for pick and drop, so if I drop this, as for the input 4, I will have 0 set. I don't have any coins inside it. So if you don't have coins, we'll not be able to further branch it down. So the end is here. So what happens, you will not get any value, which will end up with again 0. So this particular result set of the chain will give me a value called 0. And here, this is again going to give me 0. And finally, the tree for the entire right part of this particular one is going to give me 0. Same way, this particular branch. So every branch will tell me either the value is 0 or 1. So that is the one count value which I'm going to accumulate together and save the value. So in this case, what happened, I can only get the value of 0, 1, and post this, I will not be able to break it down. So here, my branch value will be with possibility 1. So this is a complete tree. So I'll end up here, and this is this will be considered with a possibility of where n is becomes 1, because n is 0. So I'll return the value of 1 here. So same way, I'll continue for each branch, and in each branch, what are the values I'm getting? I'll take those things and I'm going to count everything and then make the final result. So this will give me the actual count. So you were using some test input, right? You can tell me that. We'll see whether this works for that.
So I was using 1 to 5 and n is equal to 8.
N equal to 8.
So I think it's correct output.
So 7 possibilities are present. 1 plus 2 plus 5. Okay.
Start with this input one. I was looking for this one only. So
This is the output expected.
Yeah, that's expected.
Okay.
8 ones or 4 twos,
4 twos.
6
Okay.
ones plus 2, 4 ones plus 2 twos, and
All the
1
combinations
2
ones.
ones.
Okay.
Yeah, remaining 5 plus 2 plus.
So this is the approach we are doing in recursive. We can try this and refactor to dynamic programming. You can give a try. I'll upload this in the GitHub and share you the link. You can use this reference and maybe we can see the dynamic programming in the next class together, or we can individually try as well.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm not sure whether others are joining today.
No one has joined.
No one mentioned anything. Divya would not be joining. Should put others. Okay, in that case, let's continue with the complexity part. So you are aware of that big O notation, big omega notation, big theta notation, or you have some like you have any idea on the G on that?
Big omega notation.
Sorry, I didn't get
I mean, for complexity.
Yeah, for complexity.
So the one you teach, right? Order of n or order of n squared.
Yeah, that is big
Those-
O. Like we represent that with capital O. So which is
Okay.
called as big O notations.
Yeah.
So apart from that, you would have heard these words called big omega and theta. These are two other often so-called functions. So it should be represented with, I'm not sure how to do that. It's a notepad.
Yeah, that's Roman letters, right?
Yeah, Roman letters. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you have it like,
I've come across this omega and theta, but I don't exactly remember it.
so this looks like this.
Yeah.
This is like big omega, and the other one is normal theta. So
Yeah.
we have these three representations for complexities. These are the functions we use. So in your college days or in your like 11th and 12th grad, you would have learned about the differential and integral calculus where you have used this predominantly. So what exactly these functions represent? So this is called as omega and this is called as theta function. So how are we going to differentiate these three and how that can help us to achieve the actual programming in a more effective and performative way? So this is said to be called as upper bound of your function. And the omega is said to be your lower bound of your function. So if you see in your normal differential calculus, you would see like, or in the integral calculus, you'll start with a lower value of 0 and you'll go with an n value or any higher value on the topper, and then you perform your calculus function. And the theta would be like average bound of function.
So I think O would be the worst case scenario, and omega would be the best case scenario. Like if you are going to sort an array, and if the array is already sorted, then that would be the best case. So in that case, we'll be representing using omega, right?
Yeah.
Don't
So
remember
the
exactly,
lower
but
bound would be like, so we have seen the various values, right? Like O of 1, O of n, O of n squared, and O of log n. So if you range them, the constant will always be first. The next would be the log of n. Okay. And the next would be with the square root of n. The next one would be like n. Next would be like, again, the same pattern repeats, n log of n. And it would be like n square n cube to n power n. So which is nothing but 2 power n. So finally it is with n power n. So this would be the range, like from constant to the higher value. So if you see the lower bound, we have this as the first value will be a lower bound, and the mid, like where you have from n to n before n squared, that would be your average bound. And the final part where it's 2 power n and everything would come into the consideration of upper bound. So this would be the range. So we always need to consider lower bound. Whenever we are trying to write a program, we need to see the complexity is always below average and not above average. If you go with the upper bound, like if the complexity of your problem is really heavy, and in that case, you can come in this range. But if it's something very simple program and you're trying to achieve your result set, it's always like you have to be in this range and not above this for your time complexity as well as for space complexity. So the lower bound will always be your big O, and this will be big omega, and this would be your theta function. So are we clear till here? You have any questions or something?
No. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So the type of time functions, right? Whatever we have seen, that would like the first one, the first O of 1 will remain a constant. And whatever we have seen as O of n square, the all n squares will come into a quadratic functions. So the O of 1 would be the constant. O of log n would be the logarithmic functions, and O of n would be your linear function, and O of n squared, right? Whatever you have it as n power n would be your quadratic functions, and which can also end up with O exponential functions too, based on the values you get. So these would be the functions which we receive, and based on this, we'll categorize them on these three functions. So if your value is something in this between range, because you're going to achieve in that range, then we represent that with big O annotation, the notation of that. And if you're going with theta, we represent that with theta. So a problem can have a time complexity in all these three ranges. So if you see any of your HackerRank programs or any of the complexities where they're actually trying to solve a problem statement, they represent this complexity either in the lower bound or in the format of the functions which they give. So mostly they'll represent in f of n should be greater than or equal to. If it's a handwritten, it would be easy since I'm using this. So for the big O notation, the function always should be less than or equal to a constant and then the some other function. So this would be the representation of your big O notation. The same way, if you go for your big omega function, then the values are going higher. So the function representation would be greater than or equal to the constant into some g of n. It can be any function. So it's just a generic representation of your function. Whereas in your average, which is your theta notation, that would be like average. So we'll say like the first one, whichever you use, c of g of n, and that should range less than or equal to the function which you're representing, and that should again range in between the other function c of gn. So to differentiate, you can have either the c1, c2 representation, c1 and this is c2. So this value has to be between this, which is called as your average bound or theta function. So these are the generic functions we represent. So can you just tell me the complexity of if function?
If is order of 1.
Okay.
Branching statement, right? Order of 1.
What would be the complexity for if you're taking a maximum of 2 numbers, or you're going to find HCF or LCM of 2 numbers, right? So in that case, what would be your complexity? Let's say we'll take the HCF. We're going to find the highest common factor, right? So in that case, how can you identify a common factor for?
So we'll be dividing the given number with prime numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Highest common factor.
But every time when you do that, right? So if, for example, let's say I'm going to find the highest common factor for 6. In that case, every time you have to check whether my resultant value, you're going to get the number of values is greater than 1. So you're going to compare every time those values after dividing it. And only if they are not equal, you're going to subtract and get the final result set. So this can be achieved either through your division approach or through subtraction approach. But whatever approach you're going to either use if loops, or you're going to use for loops, or you're going to go with while loops. however your logic comes in. So in that case, the computation for my time complexity will enter into O of n, because you're gonna do it for n times unless you achieve the final result set. But the space complexity would come into O of 1. Right? In that case,
one question more. What do you mean by if loop? Do we have loops with this?
yeah, so for example, I can do this like my while condition. Since I'm getting two factors, I'm comparing with GCD or a HCF. So I'm going to check whether my m value is equal to n or not equal to n. So let's have this as one, my first condition. And then I'll check the condition whether my m value is greater than n or not. In that case, I'll just go and subtract and get the final result set. Else I'll do in the opposite way. N equal to n minus m. So this is my basic logic to achieve the highest common factor, right? In my code. So in that case, if you see, I'm using a while loop. And the m and n values are something which changes every time. If I'm going to find it between two numbers, I'm going to do every time, and the loop continues for a longer time. So in that case, this becomes O of n. Based on n number of inputs what I'm passing, I'm going to do this continuous iteration. If it's just if or if it's just else, it would be O of 1. Simple, just a best case, done. But I'm using while loop, so in that case, it becomes O of n.
Okay.
So basically, whenever we are trying to solve a problem, as of now we are developing it, so it's better to try in all the complexities. But this level of practice will help you to identify which one to choose when you're effectively writing a business logic in any way. Like how do you do in your database queries, right? You fine tune them using other built-in functions, or you'll go with procedures and triggers to make it more effective. Same way, we are going to write our own logic. Our output would be same, but the performance will impact if you're using like more input of data. That's it.
Okay.
So maximum time will be considered as the worst case. And the average time would be considered, the average execution would be like average case. And the best case would always be with the least amount of time. So you can see the problem statements with either the time-based or with the upper bound or with the representation of big O notations with the function representation. So you'll have your programs or practice most of these ways. Okay, so now let's try the array versus array list in our way. Maybe you can share the screen so you might get an idea.
Share my screen.
Yeah, you can share this.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I'm able to. So have one class for array versus array list.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can create an array as well as you can create an array list in your main method. Any data type.
What is the size of this array?
Yeah, you can have it your own way. You can just give 5 something. So array list will always expect only the objects. Yeah.
Okay. It's fine, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Equal to new and just give control space. So you can see like the array list. No, don't write completely. Can you just, okay. Yeah, now give control space. So you can see the array list constructor, which is an overloaded one, With the default constructor, you have something with collection and question mark extends integer, which is a generic representation. The generics we haven't seen it, so we'll come to that little bit. And the third one is array list with initial capacity. So there are three ways to create your array list object. But if you see the line number 7, whenever you're creating an array, you're predefining with the size 5. If you're not giving the size value, it will not consider it. So you have to define your size. Whereas in array list, you can either have your initial capacity defined and you can upgrade it, like you can grow your array list later point dynamically. But if you don't want any predefined capacity and you wanted to just add the data on runtime, you can still do that with your default constructor. So there are two ways. Maybe you can just go with the array list with initial capacity for right now, and we can change that later.
Okay. So at least if you want to grow it, we can just add the elements, right?
Yeah. So and what to say, if you're a advanced developer, like for this particular scenario, this much of capacity is required from an array list to store or hold values, then you can initiate the initial capacity. But if you're a very much pretty new to the programming practice, what we do is we just go with the default constructor, where it will take any number of values you pass to array list. So whatever data you're going to pass through array list will be stored in your heap memory. So it will be like extra memory created if you're not using it, the accurate memory size, whichever you're defining it in the initial stage. So it will be like, it will create an array list. Array list representation would be similar to your array. So if you're having with an array indexes of say 32, but you are using only 4 positions in that, it's waste of memory. So in that case, we can reduce our indexes by giving the initial capacity value. So it's just an approach. So either you can go with a defaulted one, or you can have your own capacity. And even if you exceed that capacity, the system will not throw you any error on runtime. It will internally resize your entire array list. It will create a new copy of your array, store all the data in the fresh copy, and then delete the old copy and add your data in the new copy. So anyway, it will not return you any error. But it's a best practice to always follow the initial capacity. So you will be more clear about what was your array list size.
We'll go with this one.
Yeah, you can go with the initial capacity right now.
And I had one more doubt. So I'll do Fibonacci.
Okay.
So we declared this array with capacity 10,000, right?
Yeah.
So when we declare this, we are wasting memory here, right?
Yeah, we are wasting it. But in our use case, you can just have it 10 also. If your array list, or if you're having only like less number of Fibonacci, you can go with that. But there might be cases where you are going to get the data dynamically. So in your input right now, you're having only 5 as your Fibonacci, and you're getting the expected result set, which would be less than 20 positions. But in case of, say example, you're finding a Fibonacci series for 20 numbers. In that case, the recursive will be happening multiple times. So you have to store multiple element of values. Int of 0, int of 1 till int of 19, you have to have the values stored. Only then you can reuse them. So in that case, if you're having, say, if your test data, whenever you go for HackerRank or something, they might give the possibility of data from simple to the maximum. So where we fail with the maximum value. So where it's always better to have a huge data if you're practicing for your programs. But right now, in your case, this is not required as 10,000. You can reduce that.
Yeah.
But if
will add up to space complexity, right? If we have it as 10,000 and we are not.
Sorry, didn't get you.
So this will add to space complexity increase, right? If we have it as 10,000.
But if you're writing somewhere your program, generic program, they might create some test cases in all the ranges, right? So in that case, your programming might fail if they're testing with an upper bound of values. So, so that is always better to have some average range of values if you're attempting to any programming practices. It's always better to see your test cases also, because the test cases, like they might have Fibonacci of 5, they have Fibonacci of 100, and suddenly they give Fibonacci of 10,000. So in that case, your array will not be able to hold those values since your array size is less than that. So only in that case, you might need to consider. But if your problem statement really requires huge value, you can go with the higher value. Otherwise, you can go with the limited one.
This one.
Yeah.
I'll
So
make
now
it
can you
clean.
just go into that new array list, class? Just go to the class file. Yeah. So if you see here, the array list constructor is having the first one with the defaulted, right? Can you go and open the default capacity empty element data? Yeah, which is nothing but an empty object array. So in your case of list, the list will have the structure of two, like for example, two places. One will be your value and the next one will point it to the next data. So if you see this code, the initial default capacity is initialized with 10. In line number 118, you can see the 10. And the element data would be your object array. So the data which holds your input or integer 10 or whatever value you're going to hold it, that would be into that object array. But you need to also have like a notation where you're going to point at your next location where your next data is present. For that, you'll have your address related element data. So can you just scroll down once? Yeah. So if you see in the array list with initial capacity, line number 154, there is a one constructor with initial capacity. So every time, whenever you pass your capacity value, it checks whether the capacity value is greater than 0 or not. If it is greater than 0, it creates the position, like the entire element data structure gets created with your defined value. If your value is 0, it will just create the data with the empty element data. Now, can you go to the empty element data? So which is like it doesn't have anything. Nothing is defined. It's just an empty object array. So your object, like whenever you're creating an integer array, right? You can either give like new int of 5, and then in each element you can add your value. Or if you have some values organized, like you want to give it runtime, not giving it in specific to index, you can still represent them within the curly braces. You can give those values. So here, instead of giving new object of and creating an array symbol like square braces, they have resembled that with the parenthesis. Now, can you scroll a little down and see the initial capacity? Yeah. So how is actually this initial capacity is getting identified every time? So we should have some kind of constraint, right? You need to put on hold, like after this, you should not create some memory. You have to create some more memory. You have to refresh or resize your entire array list and create a new one. So those conditions would be given based on the load factor.
Okay.
So can you just open ensure capacity method? Just give
Ensure.
Control O. It's a shortcut key to see the number of methods. And here you can see, yeah, can you go to the ensure capacity? Yeah. So here, if we can actually increase the capacity of that particular one, and the relevant method, which is inside 220 grow, will help you to increase that capacity. So this will help you, like whether the like stack overflow error, which we saw yesterday, right? The similar way, if you want to have the out of memory error or something, in that case, we can give some constraint or handle those exceptions in this capacity level.
Okay.
So now, if you have defined something, just keep a debugger point in your array list of initial capacity, like the first parameterized one, right? Can you keep a debugger point there?
Any shortcuts for that?
Yeah, go to the array list class, the dot class file which you opened, and go to the array list of with initial capacity constructor, overloaded constructor. I think it's in top. Yeah, just keep a debugger on line 155 on your left. Just double click on your line before line 155. Just double click that. Just double click on the line. You have a pink line, right? Yeah. So now also keep one more on the, yeah, this should be fine. Okay. Now can you go to your array versus array list class where you're creating your object? Yeah, you can give some initial capacity. Yeah. And semicolon. Okay. Now, in your S of object, right, in 5, you will give some values defined. So instead of giving int of 0 equal to int of 1 equal to, give it dynamically within the curly braces. So it would be easy. So you can just remove new int and within the curly braces, give the 5 values. So this is the way for you to create your array and then add your data into your array. Whereas in an array list, you have to use a method to add your data. So if you use AL, is an object dot, you can add two ways. Just give control space. I think you haven't added everything within main method, so you're getting this issue. Create a main method for this one, the driver method. Yeah, and it's main. Okay, so now here, copy the 7 and 8 lines. Yeah, now AL dot, if you see, there are two ways: add integer directly, or you have to give add int of index and integer. So why do we have this index, and what happens if you're not using that index? So in the array list or the linked list, whatever you're going to use right now, it will insert your element in the order you insert. So if you're giving like in the array list of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the output finally whatever you receive will be in the same order 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It will not sort by itself whenever it's rendering its data. So it will always be the way you insert them. So if you want to just give add of integer, and that will also work. If you give specific index and add that value, that will also work. So you can give in two ways now. So add of, and you can give some values. And AL add of, it is similar to your index position of array. So you can give 1, comma, and 2. So first index will have the value of 2. And you can add.
We are not getting this AL dot when we are declaring it outside.
Because you are not having the main method, right? You're not having any main method, not a static method too. So what happens is the class will not know like where should it create its object or how to access them. Like you should always have a driver to initiate that flow. Either it can be any static method or any kind of a method, instance method. But since you don't have that, it was causing us error. Now, now just print S and then print AL insert. Since in your array list, you have added only for 2 positions and not for the other 3. So you will have value as 0 or you'll have value as null. Okay. Now, in the next sysout line, just have AL dot get of 2. Get of 2. So right now you didn't add any value to your second index, but what would be the value for you? What are you predicting? What would you get it in AL get of 2?
I think it's an integer.
It's an integer wrapper class, right?
Index 2 out of bounds.
So index 2 out of bound for the length 2. So okay, give get of 1 now instead of 2. Yeah, try it again. So though you have created an array list with specific capacity of 5, internally it still doesn't hold any value. So you'll always have an array index out of 1 if you're accessing more than the specified index. So in that case, what you can do is you can predefine the array list with a default value. So if suppose if you're not adding anything, you can just have AL.add1 with null, or you just give AL.add null. So every time you get null pointer exception and not array index bottom exception, but internally those two are again falls into runtime exceptions only. So to avoid that, whenever we are using the array list, we always make sure that the array list is not empty and the element which you're taking is not empty. It is like a precondition you have to consider whenever you're going to do some kind of business logic on top of array list. we need to consider whether your list is empty or not, because before that, if you're not checking the list empty or not, we'll end up with a null pointer exception or array index bound of exception if you're working on the index positions. So it's always better to pre-check them. Now, let's set the value in the get of 1. Earlier, you have set value with 2. So now I want to update the value with, say, 10. So how can we do that? So after line number 19, you can just give al dot add, so al dot, and you can see a method set. Just type set, yeah. So here, for the specific index, when you're setting it, you can't set for the entire array list, right? So you need to specific based on the index position. So based on your index position, you can set the value. So now give the value for 1 with some other value, and also for al dot set of 2, give some other value.
So does it needs to be in order, or can we set for al dot set of 4th index?
Yeah, that's what we can set that. In the next one, you can just use a different index which you haven't used so far. Yeah. And now print just al. So in your array, how do you set a value? If you want to update a value in array, how would you do that?
Index.
Yeah, in your index. Okay. So what happened here? You got again index out of bound exception. Why so? Because in your set of 4, you haven't added any value. In your creation, you didn't add your index 4, or you didn't add a value still 4. So your index position of 3 is still empty, and your index position of 2 is still empty, but you're pointing to add it as a new value on your set, which is not acceptable. You'll get a runtime exception. So you need to add the values initially on that specific index, and only then you will be able to update them. Not on, if you're not having a creation, you will not be able to update it. This is one more point.
So we can do al dot length here, right? Will this work?
Not length, size.
Length is for arrays.
Yes, length is an attribute, and here this would be a method. It's a method. Yeah, and even if you give al dot size, the size of an array list is right now 5, right? But you're trying to set on a 5th position, but you haven't created in the, if you see in the line number 13 and 14, you have added only 2 values. So your array list will have only 2 positions and not 5 positions. Though you have created initial capacity with 5, it will not be similar to your int, like normal int arrays, what you create.
Okay, so how will we find the non-empty positions in an array list?
Come again?
In this case, so in this case, we have the node 0 and node 1 filled, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get to know that only these 2 nodes are filled and these 3 are empty?
So your voice is little low at the end.
So is there any function to find the number of nodes filled in an array list?
No, you can't check that. You can check only through size. So instead of set, you just print al dot size, and you'll be able to see how many sizes you have. And based on that, we can be able to iterate for the further traversal of your list. So in your case, in line number 22, you haven't created an element in position 2. So you got an exception there.
Okay, so we can add.
You can give add, and then you can update it later, but you have to add it. Otherwise, that will not be create any value.
Set can be used only to
modify the existing. Yeah.
Al dot size.
If you print after line number 22, you will get a size of 3.
So this one is giving the number of nodes.
Yeah.
Right?
So whatever, every object will have the relevant specific index position, and then the data and the address position. So though you have created an array list with initial capacity of y, that is not considered unless you add or any element into that list. So though you have 10,000 entries also, it will not consider. Whereas in your array, if you just check the size of your array, it will still show you 5. So now can you just print s dot size before al dot size? Sorry, s dot length. Sorry. Yeah. Execute. Now you'll have 5 as your length. Okay. Now remove one element in your array.
Array. You mean this one?
You just give new int of 5. Remove the, just comment it out and give new int of 5. Comment only the right part and then just give new int of 5. Execute. So you still see, though your values are not added into your array, if you have predefined size, that is considered into size factor. But in case of array list, unless you add your elements, it will not be considered into size. So though whatever capacity length you define it initially, that grows dynamically unless you use the method add. So that is one more point. So it is not a predefined size. You can't add values later point of time. So whenever you add, at that point, the size gets incremented immediately by resizing inside the, which is happening in the back end, the resizing part. Okay. So now you know how to create, how to retrieve, and how to update. So can we delete any data? So there's also one more method given by the array list itself. Al dot, if you see there, remove, there's a method called remove. So if you see remove based on index. So if you want to remove any specific index, you can just give remove and the specific index value.
So if we break the chain, like there are 3 elements or 3 nodes. If I remove the middle one.
Yeah. So whenever you're trying to remove an index which is in between, right, not in the first or the last, what happens is it will resize again. So it will create a new copy of your entire array list and it will remove the data, whatever you have asked for, and it will create a fresh copy. So it is always like delete, create, delete, create. This is what happens in behind. The advantage of arrays, retrieval is easy, but the creation and the deletion is little heavy, which is because it's always going to resize your array list. Now, you got about the deletion. So how are we going to traverse through it? So you have now in the array part, instead of giving you int of 5, you just have the earlier one which you have used, your dynamic thing. Just comment that and update this. Okay. So right now you have S. So how do you iterate in a S if you want to get a value from specific position in your array? How do you do that on your iteration? Basically traversing using for loop, right? So in your array list, how can we do that? So if you go to the array list class, array list.class file, just give Control O and search for iterator, list iterator or iterator. Yeah. So can you open that method, iterator? Okay. So that internally has a list iterator which is specific only to array list and linked list. So what does this iterator does? Can you open that iterator like in 1 to 7 in the return type iterator? So this is an interface. And what does that within the angle bracket, there's something called E. So what does that represent is it represents the element. What type of element you're going to iterate on. So it can be a string or it can be a specific customized object or it can be a wrapper class. It can be any type of data. So in Genrix, if you want to represent any data type and that is going to come in your return type of your function, we represent that with the E and E notation. So now in this iterator, right now you have used iterator for integer wrapper class because you have created an array with integer. So in that case, what does has next method? Can you just give control O in this? So you have three methods here, basically has next, next, and then remove. So how what happens in a list is every time it first goes to the first node, it checks whether the element which you're searching is available in that particular data node. If that is available, it will return it. So what we can do is has next is like to check it whether I have any data in my list or not. And if so, tell me the data. To get the data, we use the word next. So if you see the return type of next, it's E. So if you're using an integer, you'll get an integer value. If you're using a string, you'll get a string value. If you're using an employee, you'll get an employee value. So the return type of that particular object is the value which you can execute or take it from the method next. Whereas the has next is just a precondition, like whether the next node, whenever I'm iterating, I never knew what is the end of that particular node. So if there are 5 elements, I know fifth element is the last, but on iteration, I'll never know which is the last element. So to check that, I'll have a precondition check has next. So if this is the last node in my list, I'll not go for has next. I'll break and come out and take the next element and break the chain. So to break that chain, we have this has next method. And the remove is basically like how do you delete it? The same way we have the remove method. And there is also one more thing called for each remaining that has been introduced in Java 8. So we learned about the for each streams, everything in Java 8. Once we are very strong in the collections using for each and normal iterator, then we can use the for each remaining. It's basically like enhancing your piece of code from 10 lines to 4 lines. Minimizing that is what the Java 8 does. So we'll just work on this has next, next, and remove now. Now can you go to your class? Yeah. So now create an iterator. So iterator is an interface, right? So you can go give iterator interface which accepts an element type. So your element type is integer. Yeah, create a reference. This is again your type reference. No, reference name, object name or reference name. After integer, you have to give some object name, right? You give just iterator. No. Outside that, outside the angle bracket, like how do you create a class name, object name? Same way you create some reference name here. You can just give itr, iterator. Okay, equal to. Now you have to create an object, but for which you will create, because iterator is an interface. So for which one do we need to do? We are going to iterate on array list. So what is your object of your array list?
AL, right?
Yeah, just use AL. Dot. Now you can see methods like iterator, list iterator with index. So first we'll go with normal iterator. Go with iterator, semicolon. So this iterator is a method, is a used logic written in your subclass of array list, and we are using that in your iterator. So now we are going to check every time whether that is the first element or last element, do we have some data or not. For that to result, to get that result set, we are using while loop. So can you create while loop after that line? Yeah. And within that give condition it, and we are going to use the method has next. So this tells me true or false. Only if it is true, I'm going to go in. And now if it's true, I'm going to get the data. Based on the object it, I'm going to get the data using next method. So it, right, it dot next.
We need to print this or?
Yeah, we'll print it out. So you have got it dot next. So just print it out and sys out. Okay. So now save and you can execute this one. So you had only 2 elements, you removed it, right? So you had only 2 elements. So the final list, if you see 1, 2 is your final array list. And when you're iterating it, you're able to get each element. Now, on this iteration, I'm going to do one more condition. If my value is equal to 2, I'm going to print or I'm going to increment its value by 1. So in that case, what you can do is you can retrieve it.next in an integer variable. That's an integer, right? You can have it in integer. So after line number 36, int.
I will declare it outside.
No, anyway, it is going to be local, right? So you can have it within the loop.
But if we keep it inside the loop, it will be multiple declarations, right?
Okay, got it. Yeah. So give one condition. If my j is equal to 2, give j plus plus.
J plus plus.
And yeah, just give it if equal to 2. Anyway, you're taking it.next in j. So just increment j plus plus and print that value.
I'm not getting. So if j is equal to 2, should I?
So only if my value is 2, I'm going to update the value of it.next by 1. Since you're handling it in j value, I'm just giving j plus plus. Okay. Now in print system.out.println, print j.
Okay, so we are not updating the array list, but we are just printing it with an incremented value.
Yeah. So whenever you want to do your own type of logic, right, based on few conditions, you can do this in this way. So on your traversal, you can add your condition. I think there's extra semicolon line number 41. Yeah.
I run it.
Yeah, you can run it. So what happened right now is only if my value is 2, when I'm retrieving that, I incremented the value and it is getting printed as 3. So the same way, is it possible to do it in your for each? So there's some kind of for loop, which is called for each, that can be used only for your object types and not for primitive types. So how does that look like? So after this while notation, like after this 42, can we have one for loop, normal for loop? Don't write any conditions inside. Yeah. Now here, what is your array list object? It is AL, right? Create one semicolon within the for loop. Have one semicolon. And to your right, always you need to select the object which you're going to traverse or iterate. So right now we're going to traverse on AL. So just have AL on your right side. Now, before sorry, it's not semicolon, colon. Okay. So before colon, give control space. So if you see, it is asking us to consume the first one. The return type is integer, right? So the AL is the one which returns you integer. So on every iteration, you'll get an integer value. So in 43, create an integer and a reference. Create integer class with a reference. No, within before colon. Whatever you're typing, just paste it before colon. Integer and one reference. And now within that, give system.out.println and print I. Now print this one. So what happened is you got the same output 10 and 2. I think you're doing the removal.
So this one is the correct one.
Okay.
The recent one, 1, 10, 2.
Okay, fine. 1, 10, and 2. So now if I need to do a condition like what I did in line number 38, will I be able to do or not? We'll check that out. Now within the for each, write the same condition. If I equal to 2, I gets incremented by 1 and then save and execute. You're able to achieve it. Now, what is the difference between the while loop and the for loop which we have used? When do we need to go for? You are able to come up with the same thing. We have done the traversal in both the cases, but what is the major difference?
So This one,
Think in your complexity perspective.
so we are having one more variable here. Space complexity would be more, but it would be in order of one. So not an issue. Yes.
Okay. Now we have give this condition, right? Let's do one more thing. In the iterator, we have one more method called remove. So we'll do one thing there. So if j equal to 2, instead of incrementing it, we'll do it dot remove. In line number 39, use it dot remove. Okay. Now print that particular for loop alone. Let's just out of j.
You want to print j. Which one?
Yeah,
You want
just
to
print j. Just print j.
Oh, it's already been printed, right?
Okay. Now execute it.
Okay, so 2 got removed.
Can you just comment the line number 46? We'll see what is happening. 46. Okay. Your J is alone getting printed, I guess. Okay. Now print IT instead of there. Just print IT. Now execute. So whenever you're using the array list, right, it will always have the object notation because you're using array. So that is the reason you're getting IT. You can print IT dot next if you want the value. So if you see, what happened? Instead of taking it in the J, because int is a primitive type, right? So I didn't notice that. So you can just give integer, or you can directly say it dot next equal to 2. Instead of assigning to a variable, just have it dot next equal to 2.
So this will throw maybe array index out of bound, because if id dot next equal to 2, which is the last element, we'll be removing it, and we are trying to print id dot next afterwards. So I'm not sure if this will go through. No such thing.
Okay, just print IT. You will be able to see only 2 elements list reference.
I'll print AL at the last.
Yeah, you print AL. That will also work. So right now you're able to remove it from the list. Now the same thing can you try in your for each? Like if I equal to 2.
I'll remove 10. 2 is already.
Yeah. Okay.
So we need to use AL dot remove or I dot remove.
So right now, if you see, just give I dot and give control space. RE, you're able to see remove. I don't know, because that is only available from iterator. Right? So in your for each, you'll not be able to do that. You can give AL dot, like if I equal to 10, within that give AL dot remove of I. Yeah, give that.
Okay, I will be holding the value, right, and not the index. So
no, that would be a reference, because you have remove in 2 methods. One is remove with index, remove with object. Now we are passing object. Okay, now execute it.
AL.
Yeah, you can print AL. So what happened is you got something new error which you haven't seen so far, which is concurrent modification exception. So in case of iterator, whenever we are doing iterator, it will create its own list in the backend. And if you want to do some explicit operations on specific value or indexes, we'll be able to do, and that happens in that specific copy. So there won't be any issues. But in case of for each, that will have only one copy of data, and that will be iterated and updated often and often. So when you're trying to update the same list value, by removing the relevant value, so the same list has to be updated after removal also. So in that case, two operations happening in the same list reference, which is AL, two operations are going to happen. Like it is like a deadlock situation. Which one should I execute first? So that will end up with concurrent modification exception. So we can resolve this concurrent modification exception, but which one do we need to choose when we have a requirement, like we need to iterate on specific level? And if, say, example, you have a student list, and in the student list, which student who has registered for more than one course would be considered an offer. So you're having a use case like this. So every time you get a student list, you're going to check whether the student is already present in my list where I'm going to give offer. So I'm going to do a check apparently when I'm traversing through the list of the students. So in that case, if I go with for each, I might end up with an exception because I'm going to modify the same list again and again on repetitive way. Whereas in your iterator, it will have its own copy. So I don't need to worry about this concurrent modification exception, which is happening on runtime. So to avoid that, we always prefer to go with the iterator. Internally, the for each is also using only the iterator part, but it is a more advanced looping construct way compared to your iterator. So this is the one, pain point we have in the for each. So if you wanted to do an explicit condition checks on your for each level, that is not possible. So in that case, we go with the iterator. If we don't have any specific conditions, we are going to just traverse and get the element and do some other logic for entire list of data, then we can go with for each. So to resolve this concurrent modification exception, you can open your ArrayList.class file again.
What?
Give Control O. Can you scroll down?
This one, right? Check for co-modification.
No, not that. That is from sub list of class, which is internally present, not that one. So to avoid this, we have something called array copy list. In the left side menu, can you just scroll up? Yeah, on the A level. Okay, there's arrays.class. Can you open that? Yeah. Can give Control O here. Can you give AS, keyword with AS? Yeah, open that. Okay. So we have something called the arrays as list method, right? And also we have again arrays copy method. We'll see that now. But what is this as list method does is, if you see within the as list, you have a reference with t dot 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 and then a. Right? So what is actually that? It is nothing but your integers, your arrays, integer arrays or string arrays. So the way to represent your arrays is also this called as variable arguments or called var args. So where we represent our integer arrays in this format. Now, can you go to your class where you have created your array list? So now, after line number 48, you create one more array list object, array list of integer. And give some other reference equal to, no, don't create new. Some reference name equal to. Now, you have this in arrays.class method, right? Can you go to the arrays.class method? So, which is a static method. So, how do you access that in your class now? Arrays.asList. You can just have it directly used. Just write arrays control space dot asList of, which will accept one integer array attribute. So you have already created an integer array, right? Above, which is S. So give S and save. What is happening? Oh, okay, fine. Now, instead of as list, can you give two array? Remove as list and give control space. Arrays dot to. Scroll down.
That's fine.
Very bad in remembering the class names.
So string we have. Not sure. So this one, as list returns a list. It accepts integer, right? This is like generics, right? T triple dot.
Yeah, T is a generic, but the 3 dots represent the variable argument. And also, if you're having any method with your integer array, right, you can just replace that with T dot dot dot. But the one what to say, a small check is you can't have your integer array arguments, like if you're having in your method 3 parameters with integer array arguments, you can't have the integer array arguments all defined with this same format. It should always be the last one. Like if you're having 3 input parameters in your method, then the last one can be represented in this format. The only one which can be represented in the entire sequence is the last one and not the before one. If you do that, it will throw you an error. You can give a try on that. You can just have a method with 3 arrays, and instead of 3 arrays, you just have T dot dot dot. Like you can have in dot dot dot.
I need to create 3 arrays. Right?
Just have a function name. No need to create it. After line number 53, have a static method. Just some array method name. And within that, have 2 parameters. We'll have 2 arrays. Int array of A1, int array of A1, and int array of A2. So this will be the usual way we define the arrays, right? Now, instead of giving this, just give int, give void. Now, instead of giving it, just replace the array bracket with 3 dots. Without space. So what is the error you're getting? See in the left. The variable argument type int of the method must be the last parameter. So you can represent that in your code, but it should be only one or it should be the last and not in between or the first. This is just another way to represent your array.
Okay.
It is outside your class, I guess. Just keep it. Oh. So this is one way of representing the array fun. but that should always be in last. So if you see in few of the certification programs, this might be a twist, like whether to have this. They might give you in the random, but on our hurriness, we might forget whether we consider as an array, we just go and fetch the output. But the actual thing is like the ordering is the problem. We forget that.
Mhm.
Okay, now let's go to the above one, arrays as list. So now can you, since that integer arrays with int primitive type, we're not able to do it. You can just give, in the top, you can just have integer class instead of int in the S value. Okay, just have integer. Yeah, now you can have just S within the as list method. This is the one you're getting. From list integer to array list. Okay, yeah, you can just have
Okay,
list
return type
on the
is-
left. Yeah, it's a return type is list, right? Yeah, that is a problem. Anyway, the list is the interface, so it will accept array list also. Just have list. You need to import that one list. No, you need to import list interface. That was not imported, so you still have the error. No, import it. Okay. So now this is like as list is something which you're converting from your array. So whenever there is a situation you need to get your data,
So it accepts only
objects. Yeah. Array list, linked list, everything will accept object only. So if you're having anything in defined in primitive types, you'll get an error on compile time. But this is one of the way to convert your arrays into a list object directly if you're using any type of objects. So that in code, you don't need to again go and add the data based on indexes. So instead what we do is we'll go and convert them into list and add them as and when we required by using add method.
Okay.
It's similar to your clone copy. Like how did you create a clone method? The same way we would use here. So did you get the idea between the iterator and for each, like when to go for what?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is the main purpose. So now I want you to do an exercise on linked list. Similar way, you can create your object on linked list. You can get it, you can retrieve it, and you can print it. The same thing, all the methods, whatever you have used in your array list will be same in your linked list also. Only thing is you're going to change that instead of array list from to a linked list class. That's it. That is the only difference.
We can
In your
traverse both ways, right?
Sorry?
Linked list we can traverse both ways, forward
Yeah,
and
we
back.
can traverse both ways. Yeah. So if you just create one more array list, yeah, you can just have one more array list linked with the reference of linked list, not as array list, linked list.
You want me to create a linked list or array list?
Linked list. Create a linked list.
Yeah.
This time you give string. Let's try with string.
Okay.
New linked list. So if you observe this time, you didn't notice the initial capacity method as you had in your array list. So there are few differences between this and that, and why so we'll learn that. Now in the li dot, right? Now if you just give li dot and give space, iterator, just give it. Scroll down, you might be able to see the iterator. Yeah. So if you see the list iterator, scroll a little more down.
There is one more.
li dot, there's something called list iterator, right? So the iterator is something common which can be used in all your collections, but list iterator is something specific to your list interface. So you can use only in your array list and linked list class. So I want you to notice few things in the array list and linked list. The first thing is the time complexity of your iterator and time complexity of for each. I want you to try that out. The second thing is the order you insert your data. Is it printing out in the same way, or is it happening in a different way in both the cases? And also there is some method. Can you just remove the 59 and just write system.out.
You want me to write?
Yeah, system.out. Can you scroll down? Just give system dot without out. Okay, control space. Can you come down? We need to have yeah, we have nano time. Okay, go. We have n milli.
The nano times.
Just give system.out time. We're able to get it.
Out dot
T.
T.
T. T for tiger. T.
Okay.
Okay, can you just give remove out and give control space? I don't remember the method name, but it's in system package. Yeah, you have it. Can you give control space again? Yeah, the current time milliseconds. Can you get that?
Current time list.
Yeah. So I want you to use this one and check the time taken for your normal for loop using for each and using iterator. You have any number of list value. Like before iteration starts, take the value of this, which is a long value. So you have to take this, and after your iteration, take the value and find the difference between these two, and check the time execution taken for your for loop, for each, and the iterator using array list and linked list.
Okay.
Okay, so you consider this as start time and end time, find the difference on three ways. So what we're going to do as next class practices, the whatever we have learned in the data structures, right, the time complexity, we are going to notice them here through few other concepts. But for that, we need to understand like there are few principles. So when we start doing this collections practice, we'll be noticing the insertion, the way we insert the order, the sorting algorithm, what we're going to do. The sorting is not yet started from our side on the data structures. So we'll see that too. So the sorting, insertion, deletion, and the creation part. For everything, which one do we need to choose and what is the time taken for each one in the each collection frame. So that this will help you to understand the type complexity, and you can create a chart that will be helpful for any type of collections program when you're trying to write. You can just go ahead and see, okay, this is my time complexity if I'm going with a map, and as per my scenario, can I go with that or not? So it will be very easy. So I just want you to make a practice on this one using array list and linked list, and just find the time difference. What is the duration it is taking?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry I took long. I just noticed the time. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
So tomorrow is holiday, right?
Yeah, tomorrow is a holiday. Yeah. We'll connect again on Monday. Just complete this. And once you have created your GitHub, please share me through the mail. So I'll have a look on that if you're pushing your code.
GitHub account.
Yeah, the repo, whichever you're going to work for storing your programs.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Have a good day. Happy Pongal.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And happy Pongal. You celebrate Sankranti, right?
Yeah, Sankranti.
Yeah, happy Sankranti.
Thank you. This is a Tala Pongal.
Yeah. It's recording. It's progressing, right?